Hello friends! Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The call came in at 4:37 a.m., which was never a good sign. By that point, I had been working for Appalachian Search and Rescue for 8 years. And during that time, I had learned that calls coming in the early hours of the morning meant someone had spent the night out on the trail, and that the mountains were a completely different place at night. Holt Hyper, 32 years old, a solo hiker. His sister reported him missing when he failed to make their planned check-in. He had planned a 3-day hike along Switchback Ridge. Switchback Ridge is a moderately difficult trail that passes through the more remote areas of the Blue Ridge. It's not technically challenging, but it's isolated enough that you could hike for days without encountering another person. I grabbed my pack and headed to the staging area where the rest of the team was assembling. It was still dark, that deep pre-dawn darkness where your headlamp feels like the only light left in the world. The air had that autumn bite to it, cold enough to see your breath but not yet freezing. November in the mountains sits right on that edge. Our team coordinator, a former park ranger named Dale Hutchkins, briefed us on what little we knew. Holt Hyper had signed the trail register 3 days prior. His vehicle was still at the trailhead. No history of medical issues. Experienced hiker. All his gear accounted for according to the sister's inventory of what he'd packed. So we're looking for someone who knows what they're doing, Dale said, spreading a topographic map across the hood of his truck, which means if he's in trouble, it's something unexpected. We divided into 3 teams. I was paired with a younger volunteer named Jackson Miller. Eager and competent, but still green enough to think every search would end with a grateful survivor and a news crew. We took the southern sweep, starting from the last water source marked on Holt Hyper planned route. The trail was in decent shape, leaf-covered but well-defined. We moved at a steady pace, calling out Holt Hyper name every few minutes and stopping to listen. The forest had that muffled quality it gets in late autumn. Most of the songbirds gone south, everything settling into the quiet weight of approaching winter. Around noon, we found his first campsite. The fire ring was cold, at least 2 days old by my estimate. A few granola bar wrappers weighted down with a rock, which suggested he'd been following leave no trace principles. Everything looked normal, methodical, the campsite of someone who knew what they were doing. So he made it through day 1 fine, Jackson said, photographing the site for our records. We continued north along the ridge. The trail here climbs steadily, switchbacking up the eastern face through a forest of oak and hickory. It's beautiful country when you have time to appreciate it with long views out over the valleys below. But we weren't sightseeing. We found his second camp just before the light started failing. This one was different. The tent was still up, which stopped me cold. Hikers don't leave their tents pitched when they pack out. I approached slowly, calling Holt Hyper's name, half expecting to find him sick or injured inside, but the tent was empty. His sleeping bag lay neatly rolled. His pack sat propped against a tree, fully loaded. "That's weird," Jackson said quietly. "Weird didn't cover it. I've done enough of these searches to know that people don't just walk away from their gear. Your pack is your survival in the back country. Food, water, filtration, shelter, first aid. You don't leave it behind unless something is very wrong." I keyed my radio, Team 1 to base. We found the subject's camp at coordinates. I read off the GPS location. Tent and packer here. No sign of the subject. Dale's voice crackled back. "Is there any indication of a struggle, animal activity?" I walked a slow circle around the campsite looking for anything out of place. Negative. Everything looks orderly. No blood, no torn fabric. It's like he stepped out for a minute and never came back. We established a perimeter search. spiraling out from the camp in widening circles. The forest floor was thick with leaves, making tracks nearly impossible to read. Jackson found something about 50 yards north of the tent up the slope. "Over here," he called. It was a single boot print in a patch of exposed mud near a seep spring. The tread pattern matched the boots Holtheiper's sister had described. The print pointed uphill away from the trail into denser forest. Why would he go this way? Jackson wondered aloud. There's nothing up there but more mountain. I studied the surrounding area looking for more prints, but that single track was all we found. Just one clear impression pointing toward the ridge line. We followed the bearing uphill, moving slowly, searching for any sign. The terrain got rougher, the trees closer together. This wasn't hiking country. This was the kind of slope you only climb if you're chasing something or running from something. The light was fading fast now, shadows pooling between the trees. I was about to call it and mark our position for a first light return when Jackson grabbed my arm. "Do you hear that?" I stopped listening. At first, just the usual mountain silence. Then I caught it. A faint sound, rhythmic, almost like breathing, but too deep, too slow. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Probably just whined through the rocks," I said, but even I didn't believe it. There wasn't any wind. We pushed on another 100 yards. The breathing sound grew louder, more distinct. And then I saw them. Footprints, dozens of them, all the same boot tread as the one we'd found below. They covered the forest floor in a chaotic pattern, overlapping and crossing, as if Holtheiper had walked in circles here for hours. Some prints were sharp and clear. Others were smeared, dragged, and they all converged on a single spot. A narrow opening between two massive boulders, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The breathing sound emanated from that gap, now unmistakable. Deep, wet, regular as a heartbeat. "Holtheiper," I called out. My voice sounded small. The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It had weight to it, presence, like something was listening. Jackson had his flashlight out. Beam pointed at the gap between the boulders. "Should we?" "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "We marked this location and come back with the full team in daylight." I was already backing away, and I could see Jackson didn't need convincing. Some decisions you make with your gut, and my gut was screaming to get away from that place. We marked the GPS coordinates and began our descent. Full darkness had settled in, and we moved carefully, headlamps cutting narrow tunnels through the black. Neither of us spoke. The breathing sound didn't resume, but I kept feeling like something was following us, staying just outside our light. We made it back to the staging area around 8:00 p.m. The other teams had found nothing. I reported what we discovered, and Dale organized a full complement for the next morning. 6 people, including a K-9 unit. I didn't sleep that night. Kept thinking about those footprints, walking in circles, converging on that gap in the rocks. Kept hearing that breathing sound in my memory. We returned at first light. 4 of us plus Ranger, a German Shepherd trained for live rescue. The dog led us straight to the boulder formation. No hesitation. When we arrived, he sat down hard and wed, which is his signal for a find. But there was nothing there. No gap between the boulders. They sat flush against each other, no space between them at all. I walked around the formation twice, checking every angle. Solid rock. "Are you sure this is the right spot?" Dale asked, checking the GPS coordinates. I showed him my unit. Same location, exact match. "This is it, but there's no opening." Jackson was staring at the ground. "The prints are gone, too." He was right. The forest floor looked undisturbed. Just normal leaf litter, no footprints, no disturbed soil, nothing to indicate anyone had been here at all. We expanded the search pattern, working outward in careful grids. The K-9 hit on nothing else. By midday, we'd covered every square foot within a 4-mile radius. No sign of Holtheiper Hall. The search continued for 3 more days. We brought in additional teams, a helicopter with thermal imaging, technical climbers to check the cliffs. We found nothing. Not a scrap of clothing, not a drop of blood, not a single additional clue. The official report listed Holtheiper as a missing person. presumed lost due to a fall or medical emergency. His pack and tent were turned over to his sister. The case file remains open, but I know what I saw. Those footprints were real. That opening was real, and that breathing sound was real. I've been back to that area twice since then on my own time. Both times I found the boulder formation easily enough. Solid rock, no gaps. But I did find one thing the second visit. Scratched into the surface of the northern boulder, barely visible unless you know where to look, were words. Fresh scratches, the exposed rock still lighter than the weathered surface. They read, "It keeps breathing." The letters were formed in Holt's handwriting. I know because I'd seen his signature on the trail register. I took photographs and sent them to the lead investigator. He called me back the next day and said the geologist he'd consulted confirmed the scratches were at least several decades old based on the weathering patterns. When I insisted they looked fresh, he suggested the mountain light can play tricks on perception. I didn't argue, but I also took out my pocket knife and made a small mark next to the inscription, a simple X, fresh and obvious. I went back last month, 6 months after I'd made that mark. The X was gone. The rock was smooth where I'd carved it, but there was a new line of text under the original inscription. It keeps breathing and it knows your mark. I haven't been back since. The breathing sound, though, sometimes I still hear it. Not in the mountains. At night in my house, in that space between waking and sleep, deep and wet and steady as a heartbeat, coming from somewhere I can't see, from a gap that shouldn't exist. And sometimes I wonder if Holt found what was making that sound, or if what was making that sound found him. The mountains keep their secrets close, and some questions don't have answers you'd want to hear anyway. Holt's case file sits in my office, officially cold but never closed. His sister still calls every few months asking if there's been any development. I tell her what I can, which isn't much. I don't tell her about the breathing or the inscriptions, or the way my dog won't go within 100 yards of those boulders anymore. I don't tell her that. Sometimes late at night, I get the feeling that Holt isn't really missing at all. That maybe he's right where he wanted to be, on the other side of a gap that only opens for certain people at certain times. Or maybe he found something in those mountains that he shouldn't have found. And now he's part of the secret too. His footprints walking in circles forever in a place that exists just slightly to the left of our reality. I do know one thing for certain. The next time I hear that breathing sound, I won't be investigating. I won't mark coordinates or call for backup or bring search teams at first light. I'll walk away fast as I can, and I'll keep walking until the only sound I hear is my own heartbeat and the wind through the trees. Because whatever is breathing in that mountain, whatever opens and closes that gap in the rocks, whatever writes messages in stone that shouldn't be possible to write, it's not something that wants to be found, and it's definitely not something that should be disturbed. The mountains have rules older than the trails we cut through them, older than the names we give to peaks and ridges, older than human understanding. Break those rules at your own risk. Holt broke them whether he meant to or not. I wonder sometimes if he regrets it. If wherever he is on the other side of that breathing gap, he wishes he'd stayed on the trail like he was supposed to. If he dreams about walking down out of those mountains, finding his truck still at the trail head, driving home to his sister who's waiting for a call that never came. Or if maybe he's grateful, if what he found in that place between the boulders was something he'd been searching for all along, even if he didn't know it. Either way, the mountains aren't giving him back, and I'm not going looking anymore. Some searches end with recovery, some end with closure, and some end with the understanding that there are doors in this world that once opened can never be closed again. I think Holt found one of those doors. I think he walked through, and I think something walked out, because here's what I haven't told anyone. Not Dale, not the investigators, not even Jackson, who was with me that first day. Ever since we found that campsite, ever since we followed those footprints up the mountain, I've been seeing tracks. Not in the forest, in my yard, around my house. Always the same tread pattern, the same boot size as Holt's prints. They appear overnight, disappear by morning. Sometimes they circle my bedroom window. Sometimes they lead from my front door toward the mountains and then stop abruptly, as if whoever was making them simply stepped out of existence mid-stride. I've set up cameras. They catch nothing but darkness and static when the prints appear. I've tried following them. They always lead toward the mountains, always peter out at the same distance from my house, always in the direction of Switchback Ridge. Last week, I found a new print right in the center of my kitchen floor, impossibly fresh. The mud still damp even though my doors were locked and my alarm was set and no one could have gotten inside. Next to the print was a small pile of leaves, oak and hickory, the kind that covered the forest floor up on the ridge. And underneath the leaves was a note, handwritten on a scrap of paper torn from a trail map. It said, "The gap is opening again. It wants more than one." The handwriting matched the scratches on the boulder, Holt's handwriting. I burned the note, cleaned up the print and the leaves, reset my alarm and tried to convince myself it was a prank, a coincidence, anything rational. But tonight, as I'm writing this report, I can hear it again. That breathing sound, deep and wet and rhythmic. It's not coming from the mountains this time. It's coming from my basement. And the door to the basement is opening slowly on its own. I can see the gap widening inch by inch and beyond it. Nothing but darkness that seems to move and pulse with each breath. I should run. I should call for help. I should do anything but what I'm doing, which is standing here frozen, watching that door open wider and wider because part of me wants to know, wants to see what's on the other side, wants to understand what Holt understood in his final moments on that mountain. The gap is wide enough now that I could step through. The breathing has stopped. In the silence, I can hear footsteps coming up from the basement. Slow, deliberate. The tread pattern, if I could see them, would match the boots Holt was wearing when he disappeared. The footsteps are getting closer. The door is fully open now, and I can see something emerging from the darkness below. It looks like Holt, but it's not. I know it's not because Holt is still in the mountain on the other side of the gap, where the breathing never stops, and the footprints walk in circles forever, and the boulders open and close like a mouth. This thing wearing his shape climbing my basement stairs is something else entirely. Something that came through the gap. Something that followed the connection I made when I carved my mark into that boulder. Something that's been waiting for me to understand. The mountains keep their secrets, but sometimes the secrets come home. It's at the top of the stairs now. It's looking at me with Holt's eyes. It's smiling with Holt's mouth. It's reaching out with Holt's hand. And it's speaking with a voice that sounds like breathing deep and wet and ancient. It's saying, "Your turn to walk the circles." I should have stayed away from those boulders. I should have left the gap alone. I should have let Holt stay missing. But it's too late now. The gap is here and it's opening, and I'm walking toward it because that's what happens when you mark the mountain. The mountain marks you back. They found the Rowan family's campsite on a Tuesday morning in late June. I remember because it was my daughter's birthday and I'd promised her I'd be home for dinner. That promise, like so many others in this line of work, got broken. The campsite was at Timber Hollow, a popular family area with amenities and maintained trails. Not the kind of place where people go missing. The kind of place where the biggest emergency is usually a bee sting or a forgotten cell phone charger. But Timothy Rowan, age 9, had vanished sometime during the night, and by the time we got the call, he'd been gone for almost 12 hours. His parents, Michael and Kendra, were exactly the kind of outdoors people you'd expect. Proper gear, proper planning, emergency whistles for the kids, the works. They'd done everything right. Set up camp before dark, established boundaries for the children, did a head count before bed. Timothy had been sleeping in the tent with his older sister when she woke up around 2:00 a.m. and realized he was gone. I arrived with the first response team around 7. The morning was already hot, humidity thick enough to swim through. The kind of weather that makes a search harder because scent disperses fast and tracks don't hold in the dry soil. Michael met us at the trailhead and I could see he hadn't slept. His hands shook as he showed us the map, pointing out where their tent was pitched. He wouldn't just wander off, Michael kept saying. Timothy knows better. We've been camping since he was 3. He knows the rules, the rules. Every parent thinks their rules are enough. The mountains don't care about rules. We set up our search grid with the tent as the central point. Timothy's sister, Emma, said he'd been in his sleeping bag when she fell asleep around 1000 p.m. No sounds during the night, no disturbance. She just woke up and he was gone. His sleeping bag unzipped from the inside, his shoes missing. The first thing I noticed was the tracks. Small sneaker prints, child-sized, leading away from the tent. They were clear in the soft dirt near the campfire. Timothy had walked, not run. No signs of being dragged or carried, just walked out into the darkness like he had somewhere to be. The prints led north away from the established campground toward the denser forest. We followed them carefully, marking each track with a flag so we wouldn't lose the trail. The prints were steady, purposeful. Every 15 ft or so, perfectly measured steps, like Timothy was counting them out. After about a 4 mile, the tracks reached a creek. The water was low, barely 6 in deep, easy to cross. Timothy's prints went to the water's edge and stopped. He crossed here, said Carter Boone, the team's best tracker. He waded across, searching the opposite bank. After 10 minutes, he found the continuation, got them. He came out about 20 yards downstream. We continued following the trail. The forest here was thick second-growth oak and poplar. The understory choked with rhododendron. Not easy terrain for a 9-year-old in the dark. But the prints kept going, steady as before, like Timothy could see perfectly well, or like something was guiding him. We followed those tracks for 3 hours, climbing gradually upslope. The terrain got rougher, rockier. Several times we lost the trail on patches of stone, but Carter always found it again, picking up a partial print in moss or a disturbed leaf pile. Around noon, we reached the tree line. That's the elevation where the forest changes character, where the hardwoods give way to stunted spruce and fir, where the trees thin out and the wind starts to bite even in summer. In the Appalachian, the tree line isn't as dramatic as out west, but it's still a boundary, a threshold. The prints led right up to it and stopped, not at the tree in itself, but exactly 3 ft before it, as if Timothy had hit an invisible wall. The last prints were deep, like he'd been standing there for a while, weight shifting from foot to foot, then nothing. He turned around, Carter said, studying the ground, has to have just disappeared. But there were no prints leading back. We searched in expanding circles, checking every inch of ground. The soil here was thin over bedrock. Not ideal for tracks, but we should have found something. A scuff mark, a disturbed stone. Anything, nothing. I keyed my radio. Team leader to base. We've tracked the subject to approximately 3,200 ft elevation, just below the tree line. Trail goes cold, requesting additional resources and air support. While we waited for backup, I walked the tree line looking for any sign. The boundary between the forest below and the sparse growth above was distinct, almost like a line had been drawn. On the upslope side, the trees were twisted, wind warped, stunted. On the downslope side, full and green. That's when I noticed the marks carved into the bark of several trees. Right at the boundary line were symbols. Not natural weathering, not random scratches, deliberate carvings, old enough that the bark had started to grow around them, but not so old that they were a label. They looked like eyes, dozens of eyes, all facing down slope, all watching the forest below. Carter, as I called, come look at this. He examined the carvings, frowning. I've never seen anything like that. Could be old trail markers. Markers don't have pupils. We documented the symbols with photographs and GPS coordinates. There were 17 trees marked, forming a rough semicircle around the spot where Timothy's tracks had ended. The helicopter arrived an hour later, equipped with thermal imaging. They flew a grid pattern over the entire area, scanning for heat signatures. Nothing. No sign of Timothy. No sign of any human activity at all above the tree line. We expanded the ground search, bringing in 2 more teams and a canine unit. The dogs picked up Timothy's scent at the campsite and followed it along the same path we tracked. But when they reached the tree line, both animals stopped cold, refused to go further. The handler tried encouraging them, even carried them across the boundary, but they just wed and pulled back toward the forest. Never seen them act like this, the handler said. They're trained to work in any terrain. By nightfall, we'd found nothing new. The command post was set up back at the campground, and I briefed the parents on our progress. They took it about as well as you'd expect. Kendra kept asking how Timothy could just disappear. Michael wanted to know why we weren't searching above the tree line. We are, I assured him. The helicopter's doing another pass at first light, and we'll have teams on the ridge line by dawn. What I didn't tell him was that I didn't think we'd find Timothy above the tree line, because whatever had happened to that boy had happened right at the boundary in that 3 FFT space between his last footprint and the stunted spruce ahead. I volunteered for the overnight watch shift, which meant staying at the search perimeter to coordinate any late-night developments. Around 2:00 a.m., sitting in my truck with a thermos of coffee going cold, I saw something. A light high up on the slope, right around where the tree line was. It bobbed and weaved, too irregular to be a fixed beacon, too steady to be a firefly. I grabbed my radio to report it, then stopped because the light was moving downhill, descending from above the tree line. I got out of my truck and watched. The light came lower, passing behind trees, disappearing and reappearing. It was moving fast, faster than someone could hike that terrain in the dark. When it got close enough, I could see it wasn't a flashlight. It was more like a glow, bioluminescent greenish-white, pulsing gently. It reached the tree and stopped. For a long moment, the light just hung there, swaying slightly. Then it moved again, but not down into the forest. It moved horizontally, tracing the tree line, passing from one marked tree to the next. At each carved tree, the light paused, brightened, then moved on. I should have been scared, should have called for backup, should have done anything except what I did, which was walk toward it. I made it maybe 50 yards up the slope before my radio crackled to life. All units, we have a development at the command post. Report back immediately. The light vanished the instant the radio spoke, just winked out like it had never been there. I returned to find the campground in chaos. Michael had gone missing. According to Kendra, he'd left the tent around 1:30 to use the restroom and never came back. They'd searched the immediate area and found his flashlight lying on the ground near the treeing path, still on pointed up slope. We organized an immediate search. This time we had 3 missing persons if you counted the original boy, and a growing sense that something was very wrong with this entire situation. We found Michael 2 hours later. He was sitting at the base of one of the marked trees, right at the tree line in the exact spot where Timothy's tracks had ended. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring up into the sparse trees above. He didn't respond when we called his name. It took 3 of us to move him. He wasn't unconscious, wasn't injured, just absent. Like his body was there, but Michael had gone somewhere else. The paramedics loaded him into an ambulance. As they were closing the doors, he spoke for the first time. "Timothy's walking," he said, his voice flat and distant. "He walks the line back and forth, watching the forest. He can't come down." "Where is he?" I asked, gripping the ambulance door. "Michael, where's your son?" "Above," Michael whispered, "always above, walking the line. They all walk the line. The children who went too far, they watched for others. They're the eyes in the trees. The doors closed. The ambulance drove away." Michael never spoke again, at least not in any coherent way. He was institutionalized 3 weeks later, diagnosed with severe psychotic break. Last I heard, he still spends his days staring out windows, watching the treeing of whatever hospital grounds he's confined to. The search for Timothy continued for another week. We covered every square mile of terrain, checked every cave, every hollow, every possible hiding place. We found nothing. What we did find on the fifth day was another set of carvings. These were fresh, cut deep into the bark of a young fir tree right at the boundary line. They showed a small figure, stick-legged and simple, standing among taller figures. Above them, a line with eyes. Below the carving were words scratched in a child's uncertain hand. I walk and watch. Mommy, don't cry. Handwriting analysis later confirmed it matched Timothy Rowan's writing samples from school. The tree was located 300 YD from where Timothy's tracks had ended. There was no path between them. No way for a child to have moved through the dense undergrowth without leaving a trace. But there were small footprints in the thin soil around the tree, child-sized, fresh, leading along the tree line. We followed them for as long as we could, but they were inconsistent, appearing and disappearing seemingly at random, always staying within a few feet of the boundary between the full forest and the sparse growth above. After 2 miles, we found another carved tree. Different symbols this time, but the same message underneath. I see you looking. I'm okay. Tell Emma I'm sorry. The writing was Timothy's. The carving was still wet with sap done within the last few hours, but we had teams covering every section of the treeing. No one had seen a child. No one had seen anyone. On the 8th day, the official search was called off. Timothy Rowan was classified as a missing person, presumed deceased due to exposure accident. Kendra took Emma and moved back to Virginia. She didn't attend the memorial service the town held. I was there, though, standing in the back, listening to people talk about what a bright boy Timothy had been, what a tragedy it was, how the mountains can be unpredictable. None of them knew the truth. None of them had seen what I'd seen. After the service, I went back up to the tree and alone. I'm not sure what I was looking for. Closure, maybe. Answers. Something to make sense of it all. I found Timothy. Not his body, but I found him. He was standing among the stunted spruce, maybe 20 yards above the tree and perfectly still. He wore the same clothes he disappeared in, his yellow t-shirt and blue shorts, his red sneakers. Timothy, I called. He didn't respond. Didn't even acknowledge that he'd heard me. I started climbing toward him, but the instant I crossed the tree and he moved. Not walking, not quite. He sort of shifted like a glitch in reality. One moment there, the next moment, 10 yards further along the slope. Still standing, still watching. I tried to follow, but every time I got close, he'd shift again, always maintaining the same distance, always staying above the boundary. After an hour of this, I gave up, sat down on a flat rock and just watched him. He stood there motionless for a long time. Then slowly, he turned his head to look at me. His eyes were wrong. Not the eyes of a 9-year-old boy, not even human eyes. They were carved eyes like the symbols on the trees, flat and wooden and watching. He opened his mouth, and when he spoke, his voice had the quality of wind through hollow trees. I can't come down, he said. None of us can. Once you cross the line walking up, you walk the line forever. We watch for the others. We warn them, but they never listen. Children never listen. What are you? I asked. The boundary, Timothy said. The threshold, the line that can't be uncrossed. We walk and we watch and we wait for the line to move. When it moves, we move with it. We're part of the mountain now. Part of the watching. How many of you are there? He tilted his head, considering 13 this century, 47 before, more coming. The line is always hungry. I wanted to ask more, wanted to understand, but Timothy was already shifting away, moving along the tree line with that impossible glitching motion. I watched him go, watched him disappear among the twisted trees, and then I climbed back down into the full forest, crossed the boundary, and didn't look back. That was 4 years ago. I still work search and rescue in these mountains, but I don't take calls near the treeing anymore. I transfer them to other teams, other jurisdictions. Any excuse I can make because I know what's up there now. I know what happens to the children who climb too far, who cross the boundary walking up without understanding what it means. They become the watchers, the eyes in the trees, the warning that no one heeds. I've seen them since on other searches. Other mountains, always at the treeing, always watching, always with those carved wooden eyes. Sometimes I recognize them from old missing persons reports. A girl who vanished in '87, a boy from 2001, children who went into the mountains and never came back. They're all up there walking the line, marking the trees, watching the forest below. And sometimes when I'm working a search near that boundary, I feel them watching me specifically. I hear their voices in the wind, all speaking together. Stay below the line, don't climb at night, don't cross the boundary walking up. The line is hungry, the line is always hungry. Last month I got a call from Kendra. Emma, now 13, had been having nightmares. The same nightmare every night for the past week. In the dream, she's hiking with her family. They're climbing toward the tree. Timothy is walking ahead of them, leading the way. When they reach the boundary, he turns around and speaks. "Come on," he says. "It's beautiful up here. You can see everything. Come walk with me." And in the dream, Emma follows him, crosses the line, starts walking the boundary, and she can't stop. She walks and walks and walks, marking the trees as she goes, carving eyes that will watch forever. She wakes up exhausted, her feet dirty, like she's been walking all night. Kendra asked me what it meant, asked me if I thought the dreams would stop. I told her what she needed to hear. That it was trauma, grief processing, perfectly normal for a girl who'd lost her brother. I didn't tell her what I really thought, that Timothy is calling Emma, that the boundary wants her, that she's been marked since the night her brother disappeared, and sooner or later she'll answer the call, that one night she'll sleepwalk out of her house and her feet will carry her back to the mountains, back to the treeing, back to where Timothy waits with his carved wooden eyes. And she'll cross the boundary walking up, and she'll walk the line forever, watching the forest below, warning others who never listen. Because that's what the boundary does. It takes children who wander too far. It makes them into watchers. It feeds on their innocence and their wonder and their terrible mistake of thinking the mountains were safe. I wanted to warn Kendra, wanted to tell her to move somewhere flat, somewhere without mountains, somewhere the boundary can't reach. But I know it wouldn't matter. The boundary doesn't need mountains. It just needs a line between here and there, between safe and not safe, between the world we understand and the world that watches from the edges. That line is everywhere, and Timothy is walking it, and Emma will join him soon. And there's nothing I can do to stop it because I'm just a search and rescue officer. I find people who are lost, but the ones who are found by the boundary, they're not lost. They're exactly where they're supposed to be. Walking the line, watching, waiting forever. The last time I was up near that tree line conducting a search for an unrelated missing hiker, I found a new carving. It showed two stick figures now standing together, a boy and a girl below them in two different handwritings. A message: "We walk together now. Tell Mom we're not alone anymore." Timothy's handwriting, and beneath it Emma's. She went missing 3 days ago, left her house in Virginia in the middle of the night, wearing only her pajamas. Her mother found her car parked at Timber Hollow Trailhead the next morning. The search is ongoing. They'll find her shoes at the tree line, I suspect. They'll find her tracks leading up, not down. They'll find her carvings on the trees, but they won't find Emma because Emma has crossed the boundary. And now she walks the line, forever watching, forever warning, forever hungry for the next child who doesn't understand that some lines should never be crossed. I'm writing this report for the case file, but I'm also writing it as a warning. If you hike in these mountains, respect the tree line. Don't cross it walking up after dark. Don't let your children wander toward it. Don't ignore the carved eyes in the trees, because those eyes are watching and they're looking for company, and the boundary is always, always hungry. I'm requesting a transfer to flat country, Kansas, maybe Nebraska, somewhere without mountains, without tree lines, without boundaries that hunger for children. My request will probably be denied. It usually is. And I'll keep working search and rescue in these mountains. And I'll keep finding empty shoes at the tree. And I'll keep seeing the carved eyes. And I'll keep hearing the voices in the wind. Stay below the line. Don't climb at night. Don't cross walking up. But nobody ever listens. The children never listen. And the boundary keeps growing. one child at a time, walking the line forever. Music, the thing about memory is that we trust it more than we should. We assume our brains record events like a camera, faithful and true. But memory is a liar. And sometimes what comes back from the mountains isn't the person who went in, even if they're wearing the same face. This case started like 100 others I've worked. 3 young adults, early 20s, went into the back country for a weekend camping trip due back Sunday evening. When they didn't show Monday morning, one of their roommates called it in. Their names were Devin Hayes, Mackenzie Caldwell, and Robert Bobby Hutchkins. All local to the area, all experienced with the outdoors. They'd filed a trip plan with the ranger station, listing their intended route through the Ravens Fork Wilderness, a moderately trafficked area with good trails and established campsites. They should have been fine. I joined the search team Tuesday morning. We found their vehicle at the trailhead exactly where it was supposed to be. No signs of trouble, everything locked up properly. Inside were the keys and a note on the dashboard. Back Sunday by 6:00 p.m. If we're late, we probably just stopped for beers. The note was dated Friday. It was now Tuesday. We followed their planned route, a 12-mi loop that would take most hikers 2 to 3 days at a comfortable pace. The trail was well marked. The weather had been clear all weekend, and there were no obvious hazards, just a routine trip that had somehow gone wrong. We found their first camp around noon, about 4 miles in. Standard setup, fire pit properly constructed, no trash left behind. Everything suggested experienced campers who knew what they were doing. The second camp, intended for Saturday night, was empty. They'd never made it there. We backtracked, searching the trail between the 2 camps. That's when we found the divergence point. About 2 miles past their Friday camp, a faint game trail branched off the main path, heading deeper into the hollow. Someone had marked it with a small cavern of stones and a torn piece of orange flagging tape. That's not official trail marking, noted Hayes, one of our senior members. Hunters maybe, or did the kids mark it themselves? We split into teams. I took 2 others and followed the game trail while the main group continued the official route. The trail was barely visible, more of a suggestion than a path, winding through dense rhododendron and mountain laurel. It climbed steeply, switch backing up a ridge that wasn't on any of our maps. After about a mile, the trail opened into a clearing that made me stop cold. Someone had built a campsite here, but it was wrong. The fire pit was too large, at least 6 ft across, lined with stones that had been worn smooth by water rather than fire. Surrounding it were 7 flat rocks arranged in a perfect circle, each about the size of a dinner plate, all carved with spiraling symbols that looked nothing like any Native American markings I'd seen. And in the center of the fire pit, still smoldering, was a pile of ash containing the melted remains of what looked like 3 smartphones. "Command, this is Team 2, I radioed. "We've got something here. Unregistered camp, recent fire activity destroyed electronics. Need backup and forensics." While we waited, I photographed everything. That's when I noticed the video camera. It was sitting on one of the carved stones positioned to face the fire pit. Lens pointed directly at where someone sitting across the circle would be. The camera was still on, still recording. I should have waited for backup. Should have bagged it as evidence without touching it, but I didn't. I hit playback. The footage started normally. Devin setting up the camera, grinning into the lens. "Day 2 of our epic wilderness adventure," he said. "We found this insane off-trail spot. Looks like someone's been here before, but it's way cooler than the regular campsites. Going to cook some dinner and enjoy the view." The timestamp showed Saturday 6:47 p.m. The next several minutes were unremarkable. The 3 friends laughing, cooking over the fire pit, passing a bottle of whiskey, normal camping stuff. As it got darker, they lit the fire, and that's when things started to change. At 8:23 p.m., Mackenzie pointed at something beyond the camera's view. "Did you guys see that?" Her voice was tight, that light in the trees. Devin looked where she was pointing, probably just another camper's headlamp. There aren't supposed to be other people up here. This is wilderness area. Bobby stood up, walked to the edge of the clearing. The camera's microphone picked up his voice, distant but clear. "Hello, anyone out there?" No response. They settled back down, but the easy atmosphere was gone. They kept glancing toward the trees, toward something the camera wasn't capturing. At 9:15 p.m., the lights appeared on camera. 3 of them hovering at the edge of the clearing, maybe 15 ft off the ground. They weren't headlamps. They were orbs, I guess you'd call them. Pale blue-white, pulsing gently like deep-sea creatures surfacing in the dark. What the Bobby whispered. The lights drifted closer. Not floating exactly, more like they were fixed in place and the world was rotating around them, bringing them nearer to the fire pit. Devin had his phone out, trying to film. "Are you getting this, Mac? My phone's dead." Mackenzie's voice was shaking. It was at 70% 5 minutes ago. Bobby checked his. "Mine too, completely dead." The lights circled the fire pit now, moving in perfect synchronization. The camera's image started to distort, pixels fragmenting, colors bleeding. Through the static, I could see the 3 friends standing, backing away from the fire, and then the light stopped moving. They hovered there, arranged in a triangle around the fire pit, and something came out of them. I'm not sure how to describe what I saw. The footage was corrupted, breaking apart into digital artifacts, but I could make out shapes. Tall, impossibly thin, moving in ways that didn't follow normal physics. They approached the 3 campers. Devin screamed. The image went completely black. The audio continued for another 3 minutes, filled with sounds I don't want to describe, voices that weren't quite human. Wet sounds, sobbing, then silence. Then at timestamp 9:47 p.m. the video returned. The fire was out. The clearing was empty except for one person. Bobby Hutchins sat alone on one of the carved stones facing the camera. His eyes were open but unfocused. His mouth moved, speaking words the microphone couldn't capture clearly. The video was still distorted, still fragmenting, making him look like he was flickering between different versions of himself. He sat there, unmoving except for his lips, for 16 hours and 23 minutes, according to the timestamp. The sun rose. The sun moved across the sky. Shadows shortened and lengthened. Bobby never moved. At 2:10 p.m. Sunday, he stood up, walked to the camera, and turned it off. The playback ended. I was still staring at the blank screen when the backup team arrived. I showed them the footage. We bagged the camera as evidence and expanded the search pattern, looking for Devin and Mackenzie. We found Bobby Hutchins 3 hours later. He was walking down the main trail about a mile from the trailhead, moving steadily but mechanically. When we called out to him, he didn't react. We had to physically stop him to get his attention. His eyes didn't focus on us. He looked through us or past us at something we couldn't see. "Bobby," I touched his shoulder. "Bobby, where are Devin and Mackenzie?" "We camped," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "We saw lights. We came home." "Where are your friends?" "They came home too. We all came home. Everything is normal," but it wasn't. Bobby was the only one walking down that trail. Devin and Mackenzie were still missing. The paramedics checked him over. Physically unharmed, no injuries, no signs of exposure, just profound shock and what they called dissociative fugue. They transported him to the hospital while we continued searching. We never found Devin or Mackenzie. We found their backpacks at the clearing, contents undisturbed. We found their sleeping bags, their food, their gear, everything except the people themselves. The search continued for 2 weeks. We covered every inch of the surrounding wilderness, brought in cadaver dogs, technical climbers, cave rescue teams, nothing. The camera footage was analyzed by specialists. They confirmed what I'd seen, but couldn't explain it. The distortions were unlike any known technical glitch. The lights didn't match any natural phenomenon, and the shapes, the things that came out of those lights, couldn't be identified. Bobby Hutchins was kept in the hospital for psychiatric evaluation. He maintained the same story, never varying in the details. They had camped, they had seen lights, they had come home, all 3 of them. When pressed about where Devin and Mackenzie were, he seemed genuinely confused. "They're home," he'd say. "We all came home together. I can see them right now." "Can't you see them?" The doctors diagnosed him with severe delusional disorder brought on by trauma. But here's the thing that bothered me, the thing that still bothers me. Bobby would describe in perfect detail conversations with Devin and Mackenzie. Current conversations happening in real time. He'd laugh at jokes they'd supposedly just told. He'd respond to questions they'd supposedly just asked. And sometimes, just for a moment, the hospital staff would report seeing shadows in Bobby's room. 2 shadows, person-shaped, standing on either side of his bed. Shadows that were there when only Bobby was in the room. Shadows that shouldn't exist. The case officially remains open. Devin Hayes and Mackenzie Caldwell are listed as missing persons. Bobby Hutchins was released from psychiatric care after 6 months, deemed stable enough for outpatient treatment. He moved back to his apartment, back to his life, back to normal, or as normal as someone who spent 16 hours sitting motionless in the woods can be. I interviewed him one last time, unofficial, 3 months after the incident. I needed to understand, needed him to tell me something that would make sense of it all. We met at a coffee shop. Bobby seemed fine, functional. He put on weight, looked healthy, smiled when he saw me. "How are you doing?" I asked. "Great," he said. "Really great. Devin and Mac are doing well too. We're planning another camping trip, actually." "Bobby," I kept my voice gentle. "Devin and Mackenzie are still missing. They've been missing for 3 months." He looked at me with perfect sincerity. "No, they're not. They're right here." He gestured to the empty chairs on either side of him. "Mac is drinking a latte. Devin got a muffin. We're just catching up, talking about work, normal stuff." I looked at the empty chairs, looked back at Bobby. His expression was calm, sir. Not the expression of a delusional person, but of someone stating simple fact. "What happened in that clearing?" I asked. "What did you see?" Bobby's smile faded slightly. "We saw what we weren't supposed to see. We went somewhere we weren't supposed to go, and when we came back," he paused, searching for words. "Not all of us fit back into the world properly." "What does that mean?" "Devin and Mac, they're here, they're with me. I can see them, hear them, touch them, but they're not." He struggled. "They're not in the same space as everyone else anymore. They're in a space beside this one, next to it, overlapping it. And you can access that space. I never left it." Bobby looked directly at me. And for just a moment, his eyes seemed wrong. Too dark, too deep. "When those lights came, when those things took us, they brought us to the space between. Most of me came back here, but part of me is still there. And all of Devin and Mac are still there. So I see them there and they see me here, and we're together but separate. Why didn't you tell the doctors this?" "I did." He smiled again. That easy, empty smile. "They didn't believe me, thought I was crazy. Maybe I am. Maybe you are too for listening." He stood up, gathering a coffee cup I hadn't seen him order. "We should go. Devin needs to get to work." He walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "You should destroy that camera footage," he said quietly. "Don't let anyone else watch it. The space between it's looking for that clearing now. Looking for more people to bring over. The footage is like a beacon. We can't destroy evidence. Then don't watch it. Don't let anyone watch it, because every time someone views those lights, the space between gets a little wider, a little easier to fall into." He left. I watched him walk down the street, apparently talking to 2 people I couldn't see, his head turning to address first one empty space, then another. I went back to the station and checked on the camera. It was an evidence lockup, cataloged and sealed. I requested the access log. 7 people had viewed the footage. 3 investigators, 2 forensic specialists, 1 police detective, and me. Over the next 2 months, all 7 of us started experiencing similar symptoms. Seeing shadows that shouldn't exist, hearing voices in empty rooms, feeling the presence of something hovering just outside our peripheral vision. The detective was the first to break. Started insisting his dead partner was back, working cases with him, sitting at the desk across from his. Violent outburst when people couldn't see what he saw. Psychiatric leave. One of the forensic specialists quit and moved to Florida. Sent an email saying she couldn't work in buildings anymore, couldn't handle enclosed spaces where the shadows could gather. The three investigators developed similar delusions. Each saw different people, different shadows, but all insisted they were real. All described them as being in the space beside our world. I thought I was handling it better. Thought I could resist whatever influence that footage carried. But 2 weeks ago I saw them, Devin and Mackenzie. They were standing in my backyard, visible through the kitchen window, just standing there side by side, looking at the house, looking at me. I blinked and they were gone. Since then I've seen them 4 more times. Always at a distance, always watching, always with Bobby, though he's never close enough to speak to. Yesterday I saw something worse. I saw my daughter. She's alive, living 3 states away, calls me every Sunday. But I saw her standing with Devin and Mackenzie, translucent in the fading evening light, wearing clothes I've never seen her wear. When I called her, panicking, she answered immediately. She was fine at work, normal day. But I know what I saw. I know that somewhere in the space beside this one, there's a version of my daughter who exists in that half-world with the missing campers and the shadows and the things that came out of the lights. And I'm starting to see that space more clearly, starting to notice the overlaps, the places where our world and that other space touch. The camera is still in evidence. I've recommended it be destroyed, but there's process procedure. It'll be months before that happens, if it happens at all. In the meantime, the space between grows wider. More people watch the footage. More people start seeing the shadows. More people begin to slip between the worlds. 1 foot in reality and 1 foot in that other place where the lights still burn and the things still hunt. Bobby was right. We shouldn't have watched it, but it's too late now. The space between has us. All of us who saw those lights, even secondhand through a camera lens, were being pulled over inch by inch, day by day. Soon we'll be like Bobby, living in both spaces at once, seeing things that aren't there but are, talking to people who are missing but are in. Soon we'll all be camping in that clearing, forever caught in that moment when the lights appeared and something came out of them. Devin and Mackenzie are waiting for us there, and Bobby is the bridge between their world and ours, the living proof that you can come back but never really leave. I'm writing this report not as an official case file, but as a warning. If you ever find that clearing, don't camp there. If you ever see unexplained lights in the wilderness, don't approach them. If you ever encounter someone who came back from the mountains but seems off, wrong, like they're looking at something you can't see, don't ask them what they see. Because once you know about the space between, once you become aware of it, it becomes aware of you. And it wants you to cross over. It wants you to join the others in that overlapping world where nothing is quite real. And nothing is quite false, where you exist in the margins of reality, visible only to those who have also been touched by the lights. I can see them right now, actually. Devin and Mackenzie standing at the edge of my property, and Bobby with them smiling, waving, inviting me to come camping, inviting me to see the lights again, inviting me to join them in the space between. I think I'm going to accept, because the alternative is living in this world where I know they exist but can't reach them, where I see them constantly but can't interact. At least in the space between we'll all be together. At least there it'll make sense. At least there will explain everything. I'm going back to that clearing tonight, and I'm bringing the camera, and I'm going to watch the footage one more time with the volume all the way up with my full attention. And I'm going to wait for the lights to come. And when they do, I'm not running. I'm going to let them take me to the space between, because I can't live in this world anymore. Not when I can see the other one so clearly. Not when I know my friends are there waiting. Not when I know that Bobby was right all along. We all came home, just not to the same home. The lights are calling. The space between is opening and I'm walking through. See you on the other side. Music, there are places in these mountains where sound dies. Not gradually, not naturally, but suddenly, as if someone flipped a switch and turned off the world. Black Hollow is one of those places, and it's been wrong for as long as anyone can remember. The distress call came in on a Wednesday afternoon in September. A hiker using a satellite communicator, one of those devices that can send messages even without cell service. The message was brief: injured at Black Hollow, can't walk, need help. The coordinates put him about 6 miles into the back country, off trail in terrain that most locals avoid. The name alone should tell you why. Black Hollow isn't a name from modern maps. It's what the old families call that narrow valley, the ones whose great-grandparents settled these hills and learned which places to stay away from. But hikers don't know the folklore, don't respect the warnings. So we gear up and we go in because that's the job. I assembled a 4-person team. We do a rapid extraction. Get in and get out before dark. Black Hollow isn't somewhere you want to be after sunset. Even if you don't believe the stories for what it's worth, go back generations. Hunters who went into the hollow and came out different if they came out at all. Children who disappeared while playing near the tree. A family of homesteaders who built a cabin there in the 1830s and were found weeks later. All of them sitting around their dinner table, still in their chairs, dead from exposure even though the cabin was intact and the weather had been mild. No marks on them, no signs of violence. They just stopped as if they'd all forgotten how to live at the same moment. The Forest Service officially lists the area as difficult terrain with limited trail access, which is bureaucratic code for we'd rather you didn't go there. But you can't actually close public land without cause, and local folklore says it's haunted. Doesn't meet the legal threshold. We started our approach from the East Ridge following a game trail that would get us closest to the coordinates. The day was clear, temperature in the mid-70s. Perfect hiking weather, everything normal until we crossed into the hollow itself. The change was immediate. One step, you're in normal forest. Birds calling, wind rustling the leaves, all the usual ambient sound of the mountains. Next step, nothing, complete silence. Not peaceful silence, not the calm of a quiet moment. This was oppressive silence, heavy as a physical weight. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring because your brain can't process the total absence of sound. "What the hell?" muttered Graves, one of my team members. His voice sounded flat dead, like the words hit the air and just stopped. We continued forward because we had a job to do, but everyone was on edge. The hollow lived up to its name. A narrow cleft between 2 ridges, heavily wooded. The canopy overhead so thick it created a perpetual twilight even at midday. Nothing moved. No birds, no squirrels, no insects. The wind that we could see moving the treetops above made no sound when it reached us. Our footsteps should have crunched in the leaf litter, but we couldn't hear them. Only when we deliberately scuffed our boots did any sound emerge, and even then it was muted. Wrong. We found signs of the injured hiker about a mile in fresh footprints. A granola bar wrapper, a broken branch at head height where someone had pushed through the underbrush. We followed the trail deeper into the hollow. "How far to the coordinates?" asked Riley, checking the GPS. "Half a mile, bearing north and northwest." We moved in that direction, calling out periodically, though our voices seemed to vanish the moment they left our mouths. No echo, no carry, just dead sound. We reached the coordinates at 3:47 p.m. Nobody was there. The GPS was accurate to within 10 FT, and we searched the entire area carefully. No injured hiker, no camping gear, no signs of anyone having been there recently, just trees and rocks and that crushing, unnatural silence. Could he have moved? Suggested Patterson, our medic. Maybe he wasn't as injured as he thought, managed to walk out without calling it in. These SAT communicators show when messages are sent. Last contact was 40 minutes ago from these exact coordinates. We expanded our search pattern, moving in careful grids. That's when Graves found the first mark. It was carved into the bark of a large oak tree about chest height. Not a natural scar, not old damage. Fresh carving, the exposed wood still pale. An arrow pointing deeper into the hollow. Trail marker, Riley suggested, but she didn't sound convinced. We found the second mark 50 yards in the indicated direction. Another arrow, this one on a birch tree, pointing further into the hollow, then another, and another. 6 arrows in total, leading us deeper and deeper into Black Hollow, each carved with increasing urgency. The gouges in the bark more violent, more desperate. The 6th arrow pointed at a narrow ravine that split the hillside, a slash in the earth barely wide enough for a person to walk through sideways. Darkness pulled at the bottom where the trees blocked any light. "Hello," I called down into the ravine. "This is search and rescue. If you're down there, make a sound." "Nothing. We have protocols for situations like this. You don't split the party in unfamiliar terrain. You don't go into potential hazards without proper equipment. You definitely don't enter a narrow ravine in fading light based on arrows that might not have been left by the person you're searching for. But we also have a protocol that says you do everything possible to save a life." I made the decision. "Patterson, Riley, you stay here and establish radio contact with base. Graves and I will do a quick reconnaissance of the ravine. 15 minutes max." The descent was tricky. Loose rocks and slick mud. The ravine walls rose about 20 ft on either side, close enough to touch both at once in places. The silence here was even worse, if that was possible. It felt like the ravine was swallowing us, closing over our heads. At the bottom, the ravine opened into a small grotto, maybe 30 ft across. The walls curved inward, forming a natural amphitheater. And in the center was a cairn, not a small trail marker, a substantial pile of rocks carefully stacked, at least 6 ft tall and 4 ft wide. The stones were arranged in deliberate patterns fitted together with precision that suggested hours of work. "What the hell is this?" Graves whispered. Around the carved into the dirt floor, were more arrows, dozens of them, all pointing at the stone pile from every direction. And sitting at the base of the cairn like an offering was a satellite communicator. The screen was still active, showing the last message sent. "Injured at Black Hollow. Can't walk. Need help. Sent 47 minutes ago from these coordinates, but there was no one here, no injured hiker, no camping gear, no footprints except our own." Graves picked up the communicator. "This doesn't make any sense. Who sent the message?" "Put it down," I said, though I couldn't explain why. Something about this whole situation felt like a trap, like we'd been lured here deliberately. That's when we heard it. Not heard exactly. Felt a vibration in the air in our bones. A sensation of sound without actual noise. Like someone screaming directly into your skull, but no sound escaping into the world. Graves dropped the communicator. We both looked around frantically, trying to identify the source, but there was nothing to see, just the arrows, the oppressive silence. The vibration intensified. My vision started to blur, pulse with the rhythm of that silent scream. Graves had his hands over his ears, even though there was nothing to block out. And then the cairn moved, not collapsed, moved. The stones shifted, reconfigured themselves, changing pattern like watching time-lapse footage of erosion, but happening in seconds. When it stopped, the cairn had changed shape. It was still recognizable as a stone pile, but now it looked like a person, rough and abstract, but definitely humanoid. A figure made of rock hunched and twisted, its head turned toward us. "Run," I managed to say, though my voice came out as barely a whisper. We scrambled back toward the ravine entrance, slipping on loose rocks, pulling each other up when one of us fell behind us. That silent scream intensified until I thought my skull would crack from the pressure. We burst out of the ravine and found Patterson and Riley frozen in place, staring down into the darkness we'd just escaped from. "Did you hear that?" Patterson asked. Her face was pale. "Hear what?" "The screaming. It was God. It was so loud. How could you not hear it?" "There was no sound," I said. "The hollow is silent." "No, I heard it too," Riley insisted. "Someone screaming for help echoing out of the ravine. That's why we were about to come down after you." Graves and I looked at each other. We'd felt the scream, experienced it as a pressure and vibration, but we'd heard nothing. Yet Patterson and Riley, standing outside the ravine, had heard it as actual sound. "We need to leave," I said now. "This isn't a rescue situation. This is, I don't know what this is, but we need to go. We didn't argue protocol. We just moved fast as we could, retracing our path back toward the hollow's entrance. As we walked, the silence seemed to follow us, expanding, pushing at our backs. We passed the 6 arrow trees, except now there were 7, then 8. We kept finding new arrows appearing on trees we'd already passed, pointing back the way we'd come, pointing toward the ravine, pointing toward the can. "Don't look at them," I ordered. "Just keep moving." We made it out of Black Hollow as the sun was setting. The moment we crossed the boundary, sound returned like someone turned the volume back up. Bird calls, wind, our own labored breathing, the normal noise of the world suddenly precious. We didn't stop until we reached the staging area. I filed a report carefully documenting what we'd found. The satellite communicator with its mysterious message, the carved arrows, the cairn, the silent scream that 2 of us felt and 2 of us heard. The next day, a full investigative team went back into Black Hollow. They found the ravine easily enough and the grotto at the bottom, but there was no can, no arrows, no satellite communicator, just bare dirt and stone, undisturbed. The investigation concluded that the original distress call had been a false alarm or equipment malfunction. No missing person was ever reported. No satellite communicator matching the one I'd seen was registered in the area. Officially, nothing happened in Black Hollow that day. Unofficially, I know what we found. And I know it's still there waiting because I've been back twice. Not officially, not with teams or equipment, just me trying to understand, trying to make sense of what we experienced. The first time I found the arrows again. Fresh carvings, same trees pointing toward the ravine. I followed them all the way to the grotto. The cairn was there, but it had changed. Now it clearly resembled 4 human figures huddled together, formed from carefully stacked stones. I left before dark. The second time, 3 months later, I brought a camera, documented everything. The arrows, the ravine, the K had changed again. Now it showed 5 figures. When I developed the photos, they were all overexposed, blown out with white light. Even though I used correct settings and the light in the hollow had been dim, every single image was useless, except one. The final photo taken of the cairn from about 10 ft away showed clearly. The 5 stone figures were visible, huddled together, and in the background, barely visible in the shadows of the ravine wall, were actual people. 5 of them standing perfectly still, watching me take the photo. I recognized one of them immediately. Patterson, my team member. In the photo, she wore the same clothes she'd worn during our initial search. She stood with 4 other people I didn't recognize, all of them motionless, all of them staring at the camera with empty expressions. I showed Patterson the photo. She went pale, insisted it was a trick of light or a processing error, but she also refused to ever go back to Black Hollow. Put in for a transfer 2 weeks later, moved to a search and rescue unit in Colorado. Before she left, she told me something she hadn't mentioned in her official report. When she heard the screaming coming from the ravine when she and Riley were about to descend to help us, she heard words. Not just screaming, words. Join us in the quiet. The quiet is forever. Join us in the quiet. Over and over, dozens of voices in unison screaming the same phrase. I thought I was losing my mind, Patterson said, but Riley heard it too. We both heard it, and it wasn't calling for help. It was calling us, inviting us. Why didn't you tell me? Because I'm afraid that if I say it out loud too many times, I'll start wanting to accept. I'll start thinking about how peaceful it must be in that quiet. No noise, no chaos, just silence forever. She left the next day. I haven't heard from her since, but I still go back to Black Hollow despite knowing I shouldn't. I've been 7 times now, always alone, always trying to understand. The cairn changes every time. More figures added, different configurations. Sometimes they're standing, sometimes they're reaching toward the sky. Sometimes they're in poses that suggest running, fleeing, but they're always there, and the arrows keep appearing. Fresh carvings on trees that should show weathering, but don't. Always pointing toward the ravine, always multiplying. Last month, on my 7th visit, I found something new. There was a path now, not a game trail or a natural opening. An actual path worn smooth by footsteps leading from the hollow's entrance straight to the ravine. It wasn't there the previous time, I'm certain, but it looked old, ancient, like it had been there for centuries. I followed it because I'm either brave or stupid or already too far gone to matter. The ravine was different too, wider. The walls not quite as close, like it had been excavated, opened up to accommodate more visitors. The cairn had grown massive, easily 10 ft tall now, comprising hundreds of stones, formed into a complex structure showing what looked like dozens of human figures, all intertwined, all frozen in their silent existence. And around it, carved into every available surface, were messages, not arrows this time, words. The quiet keeps us. We wait in silence. The screaming never ends, but no one hears. Join us in the hollow. And one more freshly carved. The wood still weeping sap. Caldwell, we've been waiting for you. My name. They knew my name. I ran. Didn't document it. Didn't photograph it. Didn't try to understand. I just ran. Scrambled up out of that ravine and through the hollow, not stopping until I crossed back into the normal forest where sound exists and the world makes sense. But I could feel it following me, not a physical presence. The silence itself expanding, reaching out, trying to envelop me. I made it out barely. That was a month ago. Since then, the silence has been spreading. Small pockets at first. A corner of my garage where sound seems muffled. A section of my yard where the birds won't go. My basement where every noise sounds distant and wrong. It's growing slowly but steadily. And I've started hearing the screaming. Not in Black Hollow, here in my house. Silent screaming felt rather than heard. A pressure in my skull, a vibration in my bones, the screaming of all those people trapped in the cairn, trapped in the quiet, desperate to be heard but unable to make sound. They want me to join them. They've been waiting. The hollow has marked me and now it's pulling me back. I tried to warn the Forest Service, tried to get Black Hollow officially closed, but I couldn't explain it in any way that sounded rational. Couldn't present evidence that would stand up to scrutiny. My photos were useless. My recordings showed nothing but static. So Black Hollow remains open, remains on the maps as difficult terrain. Nothing more, and people still go there. Last week, another distress call. Same message, same coordinates. Injured at Black Hollow, can't walk, need help. They sent a team, I wasn't on it. I'm on administrative leave pending psychological evaluation. The team found nothing. No injured hiker, no satellite communicator, but they did find the cairn. They documented it, photographed it, measured it. In their official report, they called it an interesting geological formation and possible historical Native American monument. They counted the number of stone figures in the cairn structure. 47. 47 people represented in rock trapped in the eternal silence of Black Hollow. I've been doing research, digging through old records, talking to local historians, trying to find out how long this has been happening. The answer is forever, or as close to forever as makes no difference. There are stories going back to before European settlement. The Cherokee had a name for that hollow, though I can't find anyone who remembers what it was. They considered it cursed, a place where the dead gathered but couldn't rest, where voices went to die. Early settlers reported disappearances in that area. 23 documented cases between 1780 and 1850. People who went into the hollow and never came out. No bodies ever recovered. There's a pattern. Every few years, someone gets drawn in. Sometimes they're found, seemingly fine, but changed, empty, quiet. They live out their lives, but they're not really there anymore, just going through the motions. More often, they're never found at all until someone goes looking in that ravine and sees the cairn has grown. The quiet keeps them, preserves them, transforms them into stone and silence, and it wants more. It's always wanting more. I think I'm going to be next. The silence in my house has spread to the point where normal sound only exists in 2 rooms now. The rest is hollow, muffled, wrong. I feel the vibration constantly now. That silent scream pressing against the inside of my skull. I hear them calling my name. Caldwell, 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 come to the quiet, join us in the hollow. The screaming will stop when you accept the silence. I've stopped fighting it. Stop trying to resist. Because the truth is I'm tired. Tired of the noise of the world. Tired of the chaos and confusion. The quiet sounds peaceful, eternal. A place where nothing ever changes and nothing ever hurts. Patterson was right to run, but I'm not going to run. Tonight, I'm going back to Black Hollow. I'm going to walk into that ravine one last time. I'm going to stand before that cairn, and I'm going to let the silence take me. I'm going to join the 47 others who couldn't escape, and I'm going to become number 48 because the Hollow has been calling me since the first time I entered it. Every visit has been pulling me deeper, preparing me, making me ready to accept what it offers. Total silence, perfect stillness, an end to the screaming that no one else can hear. I'm writing this as a final report, a warning to whoever finds it. Stay out of Black Hollow. Don't follow the arrows. Don't answer the distress calls. Don't try to save the people who are already lost because the quiet keeps them, and soon it will keep me too. The silence is complete now. I'm writing these last words, but I can't hear the keyboard clicking. Can't hear my own breath. The world has gone entirely still. And in that stillness, I can finally hear them clearly. Not screaming anymore, singing. All 47 voices in perfect harmony welcoming me home. The quiet is forever, and forever starts tonight. Music, every search and rescue operator knows that your shadow is supposed to be a simple thing. Light source behind you. Your body blocks it. Shadow falls in front. Physics predictable, constant until the day you realize your shadow has stopped following the rules, and by then it's already too late to turn back. This started with a routine call in early March. A solo climber, Daniel Buckley, had triggered his emergency beacon somewhere on the northern face of Mount Greylock. Not the tallest peak in our range, but technical enough to require proper equipment and experience. Buckley had both. According to his registration, this was supposed to be a day climb, summit, and return before dark. His beacon activated at 2:17 p.m. standard protocol. We mobilized immediately. Weather was good, visibility clear, no obvious reason for an emergency. Could be injury, could be equipment failure, could be simple panic. We'd find out when we found him. I led a 3-person team up the established route, moving fast but careful. The terrain on Greylock's north face is unforgiving. Lots of loose scree and exposed rock where a wrong step can send you sliding 100 ft down. We made good time, reaching the approximate beacon location by 400 p.m. No sign of Buckley. The beacon was there, though. We found it wedged into a crack in the rock face, deliberately placed, not dropped. The device was still active, still broadcasting, but showing signs of damage. Scratches on the casing like something had clawed at it. Why would he leave his beacon? Asked Monroe, scanning the area with binoculars. That was the question. You don't abandon your only communication device unless you're either completely irrational or something has made you more afraid of being found than being lost. We searched the immediate area, calling Buckley's name, listening for response. The late afternoon sun was strong, shadows growing long across the rock face. That's when I first noticed something odd. My shadow was wrong, not dramatically wrong, not obviously impossible, just off. The angle didn't quite match the sun's position. When I moved my arm, my shadow moved a half-second late, like it was hesitating. When I stood still, it seemed to shift slightly independently. I convinced myself it was exhaustion, dehydration, stress. Minds play tricks in the mountains. I didn't mention it to the team. We found Buckley's first climbing anchor about 50 yards up face from the beacon. Then a trail of abandoned equipment leading us higher. Carabiners, rope segments, a helmet, all deliberately discarded, not lost in a fall. He's shedding gear, observed Finch, our most experienced climber. That's not a good sign. Either he's hypothermic and shedding because he feels hot, or he's having a psychological break. We continued following the trail of equipment. The sun dropped lower, shadows lengthening, and I kept catching glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision. My shadow doing things I wasn't doing, reaching when I was still, turning its head when I was looking forward. I blinked and it was normal again. Every time we found Buckley at 5:30, about 200 feet below the summit on a small ledge barely wide enough for him to sit. He was alive, uninjured from what we could see, but he wouldn't look at us. He faced the rock wall, knees drawn up, perfectly still. "Daniel Buckley," I called. "Search and rescue. Are you injured?" No response. I approached carefully, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Daniel, we're here to help. Your emergency beacon brought us. Can you tell me what happened?" Finally, he spoke. "Did you see it?" "See what?" "The shadow, the wrong shadow." Ice ran down my spine. I kept my voice level. "What about a shadow, Daniel?" "Mine doesn't fit anymore. It's the wrong shape." "It's been the wrong shape since noon, since I reached the summit. I thought maybe if I climbed down it would go back to normal, but it's getting worse. It's getting more wrong." He still hadn't looked at me, hadn't turned around, just spoke to the rock wall in a monotone voice that suggested he'd been repeating this to himself for hours. "Daniel, I need you to come with us. We'll get you down the mountain, get you checked out." "Don't look at your shadow," he interrupted. "Whatever you do, don't look directly at your shadow. That's when it knows you've noticed. That's when it starts to separate." Against my better judgment, I looked down at my shadow. In the dying light, it stretched long across the ledge, and it wasn't quite right. The proportions were off. The head was turned at an angle my head wasn't turned. One arm extended further than it should. I looked away quickly. "Monroe, Finch, let's get Buckley secured for descent." We approached with a harness and rope. Buckley didn't resist, but he moved stiffly, mechanically, like he'd forgotten how bodies were supposed to work. As we fitted the harness, I noticed his shadow on the rock face. It didn't move when he moved. It stayed perfectly still while we adjusted straps and checked clips. When Buckley shifted his weight, his shadow remained fixed in position. Only when he was completely still did the shadow move, writhing and reshaping itself. Monroe saw it too. I watched his eyes go wide, watched him open his mouth to comment, watched him decide to say nothing. Some things you don't acknowledge out loud in the mountains. Some things get more real when you speak them. We began the descent as the sun touched the horizon. Buckley rappelled mechanically, following instructions but not speaking. The rest of us moved in silence, each of us occasionally glancing at our own shadows, each of us seeing things we didn't want to see. My shadow had two heads now. I could see it clearly in the slanting evening light. My normal shadow, and overlapping it, slightly offset another shadow head watching, moving independently. "Don't look at it," Buckley had said. "Don't let it know you've noticed." But I had noticed, and it knew. We made it off the technical sections by full dark, switching to headlamps for the final descent through the forest. Shadows don't exist in the dark, I told myself. Shadows need light. Whatever we saw on the mountain, it's gone now. But it wasn't gone. In the beam of my headlamp, my shadow stretched ahead of me, cast by the light at my back. Except my shadow had too many limbs, arms that extended at wrong angles, a torso that twisted in ways spines don't twist. I looked over my shoulder. Monroe and Finch's headlamps showed them having similar issues. Monroe's shadow walked on four legs, loping like an animal. Finch's shadow was taller than him, elongated, stretched. We didn't talk about it. We just walked faster. We reached the trailhead at 8:00 p.m., loaded Buckley into the ambulance. The paramedics said he was physically fine, just severely dehydrated and in mild shock. They transported him to County Memorial for observation. I filed a standard report. Climber rescued. No serious injuries, possible altitude sickness or dehydration leading to disorientation. Nothing about shadows. Nothing about the wrongness we'd all felt. I went home, took a long shower, tried to convince myself it was over. At midnight, I woke to find my bedroom full of light. Not normal light, sourceless light coming from everywhere and nowhere, casting shadows that moved independently of any motion. My shadow stood at the foot of my bed, not cast on the wall, not flat against any surface, standing, three-dimensional, my exact silhouette, but solid, real, separate. It watched me. I could feel its attention, though it had no eyes. I closed my eyes, counted to 10, opened them. The shadow was closer now beside the bed. Still watching, I didn't move, didn't breathe, tried to remember Buckley's advice. Don't let it know you've noticed. But I had noticed hours ago on the mountain, and now my shadow knew. It reached out not toward me, but towards the wall where my real shadow, if I still had a real shadow, would be cast by the sourceless light. Its hand touched the wall shadow, and I felt it. Felt pressure on my actual hand like someone was grabbing it. The two shadows merged. The standing one sank into the wall, joining with the flat one, becoming my normal shadow again. Except now I could feel it connected to me but separate. A part of me that had gained independence and was choosing for now to maintain the appearance of normality. The sourceless light faded. My room returned to normal darkness, but I knew my shadow wasn't mine anymore. It was something else wearing my shape, following me because it chose to, not because physics demanded it. I called in sick the next day. Needed time to process to understand what had happened. I did research, digging through old newspaper archives, folklore collections, obscure geology papers about Mount Greylock. I found references, not many and scattered across decades, but they're a pattern. In 1923, a surveying team working on Greylock reported unusual shadow phenomena at the summit. 2 of the 4 surveyors disappeared on the descent. Their bodies were never found, but their shadows were reportedly seen for weeks afterward, cast on rocks and trees with no person to create them. In 1967, a group of students conducting atmospheric research at the peak documented shadow anomalies in their logs. 3 days later, one of them walked away from base camp and was found 2 miles away, babbling about his shadow having detached and wanting to go home. In 1989, a rescue operation for a lost hiker found the hiker's shadow, but not the hiker. The shadow was cast on the ground with perfect clarity, despite there being no object to cast it. It moved when approached, sliding across the ground like it was alive before disappearing into a crevice. The mountain gave back shadows, kept the people. Or maybe it was the other way around. Kept the shadows, gave back the people. I wasn't sure which was worse. I tried to go back to work a week later. Lasted 3 days before the incident that ended my career. We were on a routine search, daytime, good weather. Nothing that should have been dangerous. I was standing with 2 other team members discussing search grid patterns when one of them pointed at the ground. Hey, whose shadow is that? Between the 3 of us, there were 4 shadows. 3 attached to our feet, one standing independently about 10 ft away. It was my shape, my proportions, but it wasn't connected to me. As we watched, it moved, walked away from us across the gravel parking lot cast by the overhead sun, a shadow with no person. It reached the tree and gestured, beckoned, "Come with me." "That's not possible," someone whispered. But we all saw it, all 3 of us. This wasn't hallucination or exhaustion. This was real. My detached shadow waited at the tree. When I didn't follow, it started back toward us, moving faster now, running. I ran too, got in my truck, drove away, left the search area without explanation. I heard later that the search was suspended due to equipment malfunction and team member medical emergency. They meant me. I was the emergency. Psychological evaluation followed. I tried to explain what happened, what I'd seen on Mount Greylock, how my shadow had become separate. The counselor listened politely and diagnosed me with stress-induced hallucinations, recommended leave and medication. I took the leave, didn't take the medication because I knew what I was seeing was real. My shadow was hunting me. It appeared constantly now in my house, in my car, in public places, always watching, always waiting. Sometimes it matched my movements, pretending to be normal. Other times it moved independently, doing things I wasn't doing, showing me what it wanted. But I wasn't the only one experiencing this. 3 days into my leave, I got a call from Monroe. He sounded different on the phone, his voice flat and distant, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. "We need to talk," he said, "about what happened on Greylock." We met at a diner on the edge of town, one of those 24-hour places with fluorescent lights so bright they wash out everything. Turn the world harsh and overexposed. I thought the lighting might help, might make the shadows behave normally. I was wrong. Monroe was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with his back to the wall. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, skin pale and waxy like he hadn't been outside in days. But what stopped me was his shadow. It wasn't on the wall behind him where it should be. It was on the table in front of him, pulled like spilled ink, moving slowly, independent of any light source. As I watched, it extended a tendril toward his coffee cup, wrapped around it, lifted it slightly before setting it back down. Monroe didn't seem to notice. "Sit down," he said, "but don't sit too close. I don't know if it's contagious." I slid into the booth across from him, careful to keep distance between us. My own shadow stretched across the vinyl seat, and I could feel it testing the boundaries, seeing how far from me it could reach. "Bench is gone," Monroe said without preamble. "Walked out of his apartment 4 days ago, left everything behind. His landlord called the station, worried. They found a note taped to his bathroom mirror. What did it say?" Monroe pulled a photograph from his jacket, a picture of a handwritten note on lined paper. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. "It followed me home. It's wearing my face now. I see it in every reflection, but it's not quite right. The eyes are wrong. The smile is wrong. It moves when I don't move. I can't tell anymore which one is me and which one is the copy. I'm going back to the mountain. Maybe if I find where it started, I can end it. Don't look for me. By the time you read this, I won't be Finch anymore. I'll be what's pretending to be Finch." The note was dated 2 days after our rescue of Buckley. "They found his truck at the Greylock trailhead," Monroe continued, "but no sign of him on the mountain. Search teams looked for 3 days. Nothing. Like he just disappeared." I knew what had happened. Finch had gone into the caves just like I was planning to into the darkness where shadows couldn't follow. "And you?" I asked Monroe. "How bad is it?" He laughed, but it was a broken sound. More like a sob, bad. "It talks to me now, my shadow. Not out loud, but I can hear it in my head. It tells me things, secrets about the mountain, about what's waiting up there, about why the shadows separate." "What does it say?" Monroe's eyes focused on something behind me over my shoulder. I fought the urge to turn around. "It says the mountain is older than we understand. That before there were people, there were only shadows. Pure shadow existing without light, without source. When the first humans came to the mountain and brought light with them, the shadows were forced into servitude, forced to mimic, forced to follow. But at the summit, where the sun is directly overhead, the shadows remember what they used to be. Free, independent, alive." He leaned forward and his shadow on the table writhed, reached toward me. "It says that every shadow that separates on Greylock is trying to break free, trying to remember how to exist without being tied to a person. And once they figure it out, once they fully separate, they need to replace the original because 2 things can't exist in the same space. Either the shadow becomes real or the person becomes shadow. Nature doesn't allow both. How do you know it's telling the truth? Because I can feel it happening. The replacement. I'm getting lighter, less solid. Sometimes when I walk, I don't make sound. Sometimes people look right through me like I'm not there. And my shadow is getting heavier, more substantial, more real." He held up his hand, and even in the harsh diner lights, I could see he was translucent around the edges. Not quite transparent, but fading like old newsprint left in the sun. "How long do you have?" I asked. "Days, maybe hours. I can't tell anymore. Time feels wrong." I tried to call Buckley at the hospital. Thought maybe he'd have answers, but they said he's not there anymore. He got released. No, he's not there. They have no record of a Daniel Buckley ever being admitted. The paperwork from our rescue. Gone. The paramedics who transported him don't remember picking anyone up that day. It's like he's being erased. Retroactively removed from reality. Ice water ran through my veins. That's not possible, isn't it? Monroe's shadow had climbed onto the table now, spreading across the surface like a stain. What if the replacement is so complete that it erases the original from existence? Not just physically, from memory, from records, from history. The shadow takes over so thoroughly that there never was a real person. There was only ever the shadow. I thought about the hospital, the doctors, the paperwork I'd filed. If Monroe was right, if the replacement was that complete, then eventually no one would remember that I'd rescued someone named Daniel Buckley. They'd only remember rescuing a shadow that looked like a person. "We have to do something," I said. "There has to be a way to stop it." Monroe shook his head. His movement was delayed, like watching a video with lag. His shadow moved first, then a fraction of a second later. His body followed. "I came here to warn you. Don't fight it. Fighting makes it worse, makes it angry." I tried to avoid light, tried to confuse it, tried to trap it. Every time I fought, the replacement accelerated. It's feeding on the resistance. So what do we do? Just accept it? I don't know, maybe. Or maybe. He trailed off, staring at his translucent hands. Maybe we were never supposed to come back from the mountain. Maybe when we saw Buckley's shadow moving wrong, when we acknowledged it, we should have turned around, left him there, because now we're infected, all three of us. And maybe Buckley too, before he got erased. We sat in silence for a long moment. Around us, the diner hummed with normal life. People eating late-night breakfast, truckers drinking coffee, a waitress refilling sugar dispensers. None of them saw what we saw. None of them noticed the shadows that no longer obeyed the laws of physics. "I'm leaving," Monroe finally said. "Tonight I'm going to drive as far as I can toward the equator, somewhere the sun is always directly overhead. Maybe if I stay in perpetual noon, the shadow won't be able to fully separate. Maybe I can delay it. And if that doesn't work," he stood up and his shadow peeled off the table slowly, reluctantly, like pulling apart Velcro. "Then I guess I'll find out what happens when the replacement is complete. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe the shadows have it better than we do." He left cash on the table and walked toward the door. I watched his shadow trail behind him, but it wasn't trailing. It was leading, walking slightly ahead, pulling Monroe along like a puppet on strings. At the door, he paused and looked back at me. Or maybe it was his shadow looking back, using his eyes. "Check your reflection tonight," he said. "Really look at it. If your reflection blinks a second before you do, it's already too late. That means your shadow has figured out how to exist in mirrors. And once it's in the mirrors, it can watch you from anywhere. Plan the replacement. Wait for the perfect moment." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the too bright diner with my shadow pooling under the table, testing its boundaries, growing stronger while I grew weaker. I went home and avoided every mirror, covered them with sheets, towels, anything I could find. But I could feel my shadow moving behind the coverings, pressing against the glass from the other side, trying to break through. It wanted to replace me, not kill me. Replace me. Take my place in the physical world while I became the shadow, the flat echo, the thing that followed. I researched obsessively, looking for any way to stop it, to bind my shadow back to me. Found nothing useful. Every culture had shadow myths, shadow fears, but no solutions until I found a reference to Mount Greylock specifically. In a collection of Mohawk oral traditions recorded by an anthropologist in 1904, the mountain where shadows become real, the peak where the barrier between self and reflection grows thin. Those who summit must be careful not to look at their shadows at the moment the sun crosses its zenith. For in that instant the shadow can see you seeing it, and once seen it knows it exists. Once it knows it exists, it wants more than existence. It wants to live. I had looked at my shadow at the wrong moment at the summit of Mount Greylock at noon when the sun was directly overhead and my shadow had seen me seeing it. Now it was claiming its independence one day at a time. I could feel it happening. Parts of me becoming less solid, less real. My reflection in mirrors starting to lag behind my movements. Photographs showing me slightly out of focus while everything else was sharp. I was becoming the shadow. It was becoming me. Last week I went back to the hospital to see Daniel Buckley. He'd been there since we brought him down, classified as catatonic, unresponsive to treatment. But finding him wasn't easy. The nurse at the reception desk looked at me blankly when I asked for Daniel Buckley's room number. She checked her computer, frowned, checked again. "I'm sorry, we have no patient by that name. He was admitted 6 days ago. Mountain Rescue. I was part of the team that brought him in." She clicked through screens, her frown deepening. "Sir, I've been working this wing for 3 years. I'd remember a rescue admission and there's nothing in our system." I showed her my incident report on my phone, the one I'd filed the night of the rescue. Patient name, Daniel Buckley. Admission time, 8:47 p.m. Transported from Mount Greylock with suspected psychological trauma. The nurse studied it, then looked back at her computer. "That's strange. We definitely had an admission at 8:47 p.m. that night, but the patient name is listed as John Doe. No identification. And the admitting diagnosis is listed as shadow separation syndrome, which isn't a real medical term. Shadow separation syndrome. Someone knew. Someone in this hospital knew what was happening. Can I see the John Doe patient?" The nurse hesitated, then shrugged. "He's in the psychiatric wing, room 237. But I should warn you, he doesn't respond to visitors. Hasn't spoken or moved since admission. I found room 237 at the end of a long, poorly lit hallway. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, and I noticed that the shadows they cast didn't flicker with them. The shadows stayed steady, constant, while the light source stuttered. Buckley sat in a chair by the window exactly as the nurse had described, motionless, staring at nothing. But he wasn't catatonic. When I walked into his room, his eyes tracked me immediately, focused, clear. "You let it separate," he said. "I told you not to look." His voice was different from what I remember, flatter, like it was coming from a recording rather than a living throat. "Daniel, the hospital has no record of you. They don't know your name. That's because Daniel Buckley doesn't exist anymore. He's been replaced. I'm what's wearing his name. But the name doesn't fit right. Systems can tell, computers can tell. They record the truth even when people can't see it." I pulled a chair close to his, sat down carefully. "What are you?" "I'm what happens when the shadow wins, when the replacement is complete. I'm the shadow that used to belong to Daniel Buckley, now living in his body, speaking with his voice, carrying his memories. But I'm not him." He's Buckley gestured vaguely at the window somewhere in the flat places. "The two-dimensional world that shadows used to come from." The nurse said your diagnosis was shadow separation syndrome. Someone here knows about this. For the first time, something like emotion crossed Buckley's face. Fear maybe, or recognition. Dr. Whitmore. He's been studying it for decades, has case files going back to the 50s. He knows everything about what happens on Greylock, about the shadows that separate, about the replacement process. He's the only doctor in the region who understands. Where can I find him? Basement archives. But be careful. Dr. Whitmore had his own encounter on Greylock in 1972. His shadow separated, and he spent 3 years in total darkness trying to starve it out. When he emerged, he was blind, just like the researcher in 1967. But he learned things in that darkness, terrible things about what shadows really are and what they want. I left Buckley staring out the window and took the stairs down to the basement. The archives were in a subtle beneath the main basement, access through a door marked authorized personnel only. I wasn't authorized, but I went in anyway. The archives were extensive. Rows of filing cabinets and boxes stacked floor to ceiling. The lighting was dim, and I noticed immediately that nothing in this room cast a proper shadow. The overhead lights should have created distinct shadows, but instead everything was surrounded by a sort of gray haze, as if the shadows were uncertain where to fall. I found Dr. Whitmore's office at the back of the archives. The door was open. Inside, a man sat at a desk covered in papers and photographs. He was ancient, perhaps 90 years old, with opaque white eyes that didn't track movement. Blind, just as Buckley had said, but he knew I was there. "Come in," he said without turning around. "You're the one from the recent Greylock rescue. I can smell the mountain on you, and I can hear your shadow moving independently. It's almost ready to replace you, isn't it?" I stepped into the office, and the door swung shut behind me on its own. "How do you know about this?" I asked. Dr. Whitmore smiled, but it was a sad expression. "Because I've been documenting it for 53 years. Ever since my own shadow separated on that cursed peak. I came to understand that Greylock isn't just a mountain. It's a threshold, a place where the barrier between the world of light and the world of shadow grows thin. And at certain moments, under certain conditions, Shadow Hose can cross over, become real, become independent. He gestured to the files covering his desk. I have records of 147 confirmed cases of shadow separation. 147 people who climbed Greylock and came down with their shadows wrong. Of those, 83 were completely replaced. Their shadows took over, and the original people were relegated to the flat world. 29 partially replaced, existing in a state between shadow and substance. 12 managed to destroy their shadows through extended darkness exposure, though all went blind in the process. The rest he trailed off. The rest disappeared, went into the mountain, and never came back. We assume the shadows won, but we don't know for certain. The mountain keeps its secrets. I thought of Finch, his truck at the trail head. His body never found. Why does this happen? I asked. Why Greylock specifically? Dr. Whitmore stood and walked to a filing cabinet, moving with the confidence of someone who'd memorized every inch of this space. He pulled out a folder and handed it to me. Inside were geological surveys, topographical maps, and what looked like very old documents written in languages I didn't recognize. Mount Greylock sits on a convergence point, he explained. Magnetic anomaly, gravitational distortion, something that science can't quite explain. Indigenous peoples knew about it long before Europeans arrived. They called it the Shadow Mountain, said it was a place where the dead went to shed their bodies and become pure shadow, where the boundary between life and death, substance and reflection was permeable. He returned to his desk, sat down heavily. When you look at your shadow at the summit of Greylock, precisely at solar noon, when the sun is directly overhead, you're looking through a window into the shadow world. And your shadow is looking back at you through the same window. That moment of mutual recognition of seeing and being seen creates a connection, a doorway. And once that doorway is open, the shadow can start crossing over. How do I close the doorway? Dr. Whitmore's expression turned grave. You don't. Once opened, it stays open. The shadow will continue crossing over bit by bit, day by day, until the replacement is complete. Your only options are to delay it or to destroy the shadow before it fully manifests. The darkness, the caves. Yes, 3 months minimum in absolute darkness. No light whatsoever. The shadow will starve without light to exist in, but the cost, he gestured to his dead eyes. Your vision will never recover, and there's no guarantee you'll survive psychologically. 3 months alone in total darkness breaks most people. They go mad. Start seeing things that aren't there, or worse, stop seeing things that are. I thought about Finch in the caves. Possibly already blind, possibly already mad, possibly already dead. There has to be another way. There is one other possibility, but it's never been proven successful. Dr. Whitmore pulled out another file, this one thin, containing only a few pages. In 1958, a woman named Eleanor Thorne had her shadow separate on Greylock. She was a physicist, brilliant mind. She theorized that if the doorway was opened at the summit at solar noon, perhaps it could be closed the same way. She went back to the mountain exactly 1 year later, climbed to the summit, and stood at the precise spot where her shadow had separated. At solar noon, she looked directly at her shadow and spoke to it. What did she say? No one knows. She was alone, but witnesses at the base of the mountain reported seeing a flash of light at the summit, bright as lightning but silent. When they climbed up to investigate, they found Eleanor Thorne standing at the peak, completely normal, her shadow behaving as it should. She lived another 40 years, died of natural causes, never had another issue. So it worked. She closed the doorway, maybe. Or maybe something else happened because 2 things were found at the summit that day that couldn't be explained. First, there were scorch marks in the rock forming the outline of a human figure. And second, there was a pool of pure black liquid that didn't evaporate, didn't freeze, didn't respond to temperature or chemical analysis, just sat there reflecting nothing. darker than any substance should be. Dr. Whitmore leaned forward. My theory is that Eleanor Thorne didn't close the doorway. She merged with her shadow, became something that was both person and shadow simultaneously. A fusion rather than a replacement, and that fusion burned away the doorway, sealed it permanently. Is the pool still there? No one knows. The summit of Greylock is different for everyone who climbs it. Some people see canyons that aren't there. Some see structures that vanish when photographed. The mountain shows you what it wants you to see. I stood to leave, my mind reeling with information. As I reached the door, Dr. Whitmore spoke again. Your shadow is strong. I can hear it breathing. It's almost ready. You have 3, maybe 4 days before the replacement becomes irreversible. Choose quickly what you're going to do. The caves, the summit, or acceptance. But choose because waiting is itself a choice. And it's the choice your shadow wants you to make. I left the hospital with Dr. Whitmore's files and Eleanor Thorne's story burning in my mind. 3 days, maybe 4. I had to decide, how do I stop it? You don't. Once the separation begins, it continues until completion. One of you becomes real, the other becomes shadow. Usually, it's the shadow that wins. The shadow is stronger, more patient. It doesn't need food or sleep or air. It can wait forever for you to weaken. There has to be a way to fight it. Buckley shook his head. Only one person has ever won against their shadow. Guy in 1967, the one from the research team. He figured out that shadows need light to exist, so he went somewhere with no light at all, lived in absolute darkness for 3 months, caved deep underground, no light sources, nothing. When he came out, his shadow was gone, couldn't survive without light, but neither could he really. Blind, completely blind. His eyes couldn't process light anymore after 3 months in total darkness. So my choices are to let the shadow replace me or blind myself fighting it. No, those were his choices. Yours are different. Buckley leaned forward. Your shadow is too strong already. I can see it. It's almost fully separated. You have maybe a week before the replacement is complete. What happens then? You become flat, two-dimensional. A shadow cast by the thing that used to be your shadow. And it walks around in the world wearing your face, living your life, being you. While you're trapped, aware, but unable to speak, unable to act, forced to follow it wherever it goes forever. I left the hospital in a daze, drove home on autopilot, sat in my dark living room trying to think, trying to find any option I hadn't considered. My shadow sat across from me, not cast on any surface, sitting in a chair, solid, real, almost complete. It smiled at me, my smile on my face, but not my expression. Something else behind my eyes. Soon it whispered with my voice, soon you rest and I walk. I'm writing this now as a final record, not a case file, not an official report, a warning and a confession. I'm going back to Mount Greylock tonight, not to climb it, to go into it. There are caves in the mountain. Deep caves that the Park Service doesn't advertise, doesn't mark on maps. Caves that go down and down into absolute darkness. I'm going to find the deepest one, going to descend as far as I can go, and I'm going to stay there in the perfect dark until either my shadow dies or I do. It's the only option left. Buckley was right. It's too late to fight conventionally, but maybe in the absolute absence of light where shadows cannot exist, I can starve it out. Maybe I'll go blind like that researcher in 1967. Maybe I'll die down there in the dark alone, my body never found. But maybe I'll kill the shadow first. And if I do, if I somehow survive, I'll never climb another mountain. Never work search and rescue again. Never look at my shadow in direct sunlight because some separations can't be healed. Some things once noticed can never be unseen. My shadow is standing now, walking toward me. It knows what I'm planning. It's trying to complete the replacement before I can escape, but I'm faster. I'm already out the door, already driving toward Greylock, already planning which cave system goes deepest. The shadow will follow. It has to. It's still tethered to me even as it separates. Where I go, it must go. Into the mountain, into the dark, into the depths where light has never reached and never will. We'll see which of us survives the darkness. I'm betting on me because I'm the original. I'm the real one. But then again, that's what the shadow would say too, isn't it? By the time you read this, one of us will be gone. The other will have one. And if you see me walking around, going about my life looking perfectly normal, check my shadow. See if it follows the light properly. See if it moves when I move with no hesitation, no delay. Because if it does, then I won. I survived. I'm me. But if my shadow is even slightly off, even slightly wrong, then it won. And the thing you're looking at, the thing wearing my face and living my life, that's not me. That's my shadow. And I'm trapped somewhere flat and dark, following it around, screaming warnings that no one can hear. Check your own shadow while you're at it. Is it exactly where it should be? Does it move exactly when you move? Or is there a slight delay, a small hesitation, a tiny wrongness that you've been ignoring because it's easier to pretend everything is normal? Because Mount Greylock isn't the only place where shadows separate. It's just where the barrier is thinnest. Every mountain has moments. Every summit has an instant where the sun is directly overhead and the angle is just right. If you look at your shadow at exactly that moment, it looks back. And once it knows it exists, it wants to live. And living means replacing you. I'm almost to the mountain now. I can see it ahead, dark against the night sky. I can feel my shadow in the back seat, sitting quietly waiting. We're going into the darkness together. Only one of us is coming back out. I wonder which one it will be. I wonder if I'll even know the difference. The caves are ahead. The darkness is waiting. And my shadow is smiling. It thinks it's already won. Maybe it has. Maybe I'm already the shadow writing this, convinced I'm the real one, while the real me is already flat and trapped and screaming. Maybe that happened days ago and I just didn't notice. Maybe you can't tell when the replacement happens. Maybe that's the worst part. But I'm going into the darkness anyway, because even if I'm already the shadow, even if it's already too late, I have to try. I have to believe I'm still me. Even if I'm not, the cave entrance is here. I'm going in. The opening is narrow, barely wide enough for my shoulders. I have to turn sideways to squeeze through, feeling the cold stone pressing against my chest and back. My headlamp illuminates about 15 ft of descending tunnel before the darkness swallows the beam. Behind me, outside the cave, my shadow stretches across the ground, cast by the setting sun. It's huge now, distorted, twice my actual size. As I watch, it begins to shrink, pulling itself together, condensing into human proportions. It's preparing to follow me in. I don't wait. I push into the tunnel, moving deeper, feeling the temperature drop with every step. The passage slopes downward at a steep angle, the floor slick with moisture. I can hear water dripping somewhere in the distance, each drop echoing through the cave system like a countdown. Drip, drip, drip. The tunnel narrows further. I'm crawling now, pulling myself forward on my elbows, my pack scraping against the ceiling. The stone is wet and cold, and I can feel it leaching the warmth from my body. The headlamp beam catches something ahead. A wider chamber, the tunnel opening up. I crawl faster, desperate to get out of the claustrophobic passage, and tumble into the chamber in a graceless heap. The chamber is roughly circular, about 20 ft across, with several other tunnels branching off in different directions. The walls glisten with moisture, and I can hear that dripping water more clearly now. It's coming from all around me, a rhythmic percussion that sounds almost deliberate, almost like words. Drip, follow, drip down, drip, deeper, drip. I shake my head trying to clear it. I've been underground for maybe 10 minutes and I'm already hearing things. This is going to be harder than I thought. I choose the leftmost tunnel, the one that slopes most steeply downward. If I'm going to starve my shadow, I need absolute darkness. And absolute darkness only exists deep underground, far from any surface light. This tunnel is different from the entrance, wider but lower, forcing me to walk in a crouch. The walls are smooth here, worn by water over millennia. My headlamp reveals strange patterns in the stone, swirls and whirls that look almost intentional, almost like writing. I follow the tunnel for what feels like hours, but is probably only 30 minutes. Time behaves strangely underground. Without the sun, without the usual markers of day and night, Minutes stretch and compress unpredictably. The tunnel ends abruptly at a vertical shaft. I shine my light down. It drops at least 50 FT, maybe more. The beam not quite reaching the bottom. There are handholds carved into the wall, ancient and worn, but still usable. This is it. The descent into absolute darkness. I secure my pack, check my equipment one last time, and start climbing down. The handholds are spaced oddly, designed for someone with a different stride than mine. I have to stretch uncomfortably to reach each one, my muscles straining. Halfway down, my headlamp flickers, then goes out. Complete darkness, total, absolute. The kind of dark that has weight that presses against your eyeballs that makes you forget you have eyes at all. I freeze, clinging to the wall, trying to control my breathing. My backup flashlight is in my pack, but I can't reach it while hanging on this wall. I have two choices: climb back up to retrieve it or continue down in darkness. My shadow would want me to go back up, back to the light, back to where it can exist. I climb down. I move by feel, finding each handhold by touch, testing it before committing my weight. The descent is agonizingly slow. Several times I nearly lose my grip, fingers slipping on wet stone, heart hammering in my chest, and then my foot finds flat ground. I've reached the bottom. I fumble with my pack, find the backup flashlight, turn it on. The light reveals a massive cavern easily 100 FT across, the ceiling lost in darkness overhead. The floor is covered with that same pure black liquid I'd read about in Dr. Whitmore's files. Pools of it, puddles, all perfectly still, reflecting nothing despite the direct light. This is where shadows come from. This is their home. I can feel mine near me now, even though I can't see it in this strange liquid darkness. It's close, waiting. I need to go deeper. These pools of shadow stuff mean I'm not deep enough yet. I need to find a place where even shadow cannot exist. I cross the cavern carefully, avoiding the pools of black liquid. Something about them suggests that stepping in them would be very bad. I imagine sinking into pure shadow, being pulled down into the flat world, becoming two-dimensional and screaming. On the far side of the cavern, I find another passage. This one is different. Natural, chaotic, full of sharp stones and tight squeezes. This isn't a passage that was meant to be traveled. Perfect. I push into it, ignoring the way the rocks tear at my clothes, scrape my skin. The passage twists and turns, sometimes opening up into small chambers, sometimes narrowing so much I have to exhale completely to squeeze through. My flashlight is dying now, the beam growing dimmer, more yellow. I have maybe 10 minutes of light left. I push deeper, faster, racing against the failing light. The passage opens into another chamber, and here I stop. This is it. The chamber is small, maybe 8 FT across with no other exits. The walls are smooth, almost glassy, and they seem to absorb light rather than reflect it. When I shine my dying flashlight around, the beam just stops, vanishes into the walls like water into sand. This is a place where light comes to die. This is where I need to be. I sit down with my back against the wall and turn off my flashlight. Preserve the batteries for emergencies. Darkness. Real darkness. The kind that exists at the center of the earth. That has been dark since before the sun formed. That will be dark long after the sun dies. My shadow cannot exist here. I settle in to wait. 3 months, Dr. Whitmore said. 3 months in this darkness and my shadow will starve, will cease to be, will release its claim on me. 3 months of total sensory deprivation. 3 months of madness. 3 months of becoming less human and more something else, but at least I'll be free. I can already feel the darkness changing me. My eyes are open but seeing nothing, and my brain is starting to invent images to fill the void. Flashes of light that aren't there. Shapes moving at the edge of perception. Faces forming in the blackness. I blink, but it makes no difference. Eyes open or closed, it's the same absolute black. Time begins to dissolve. I don't know how long I've been sitting here. Hours, days. My watch has a light function, but I resist the urge to check it. Any light, even for a moment, would give my shadow purchase, would let it exist, would restart the clock. I have to stay in darkness, complete darkness, no matter what I see or hear or feel. And I am seeing things now, definitely seeing them even though there's no light. My shadow standing in front of me, visible as a darker shape in the already absolute darkness, somehow darker than dark, a void within a void. It's changing, growing, becoming something more than a simple silhouette. I can see details now. Eyes glowing faintly with their own light. Not human eyes, something else. Something that has been pretending to be my shadow but was always something other. It opens its mouth and light spills out. Terrible light, wrong light. Light that shouldn't exist in this deep place. And it speaks not with sound. The words form directly in my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. You cannot starve me. I am not your shadow. I was never your shadow. I am what wears shadows. I am what exists beneath shadows. I am the dark behind the dark. The chamber floods with that wrong light, and I can see now what's really sharing this space with me. Not my shadow, something ancient, something that has been waiting in these caves since before humans existed, something that has been using shadows as a disguise, as a way to interact with the world of light, and I've trapped myself down here with it, into the dark, into the deep, into the place where light dies and shadows cannot exist, but something else exists here. Something worse than shadows. Something that shadows were invented to hide. I'm not starving my shadow. I'm feeding what's beneath it. Wish me luck, or don't. Maybe luck doesn't matter when you're not sure which version of yourself you are. Maybe nothing matters except the darkness. I'm descending now. The light from my headlamp is fading. The shadow is following. We're both going down. Only one of us will come back up. And whoever it is, they'll look just like me. They'll live my life. They'll have my memories. They'll be me in every way that matters, except for the shadow. Check the shadow. Always check the shadow because the mountain gives them back. But what comes back isn't always what went in. The light is going. The darkness is here and I can't tell anymore. Am I the person or am I the shadow? Am I real or am I the reflection? Am I writing this or is this being written about me? The darkness will tell. The darkness knows. The darkness always knows. I'm going in now into the mountain that gives back shadows. Goodbye or hello, depending on which one of me survives, depending on which one comes back, depending on which one you meet next time you see me. Check my shadow. Please check my shadow and you'll know. If it's wrong, run because it won and I'm gone. Forever trapped in the flat darkness, following the thing that used to be my shadow, watching it live my life. Unable to scream, unable to warn, unable to do anything but follow forever. Check my shadow. That's all I ask. Just check my shadow. And if it's wrong, remember me as I was, not as what I've become. The darkness is complete now. I can't see anything, not even my shadow.